What if I told you the Vatican had a file on Meghan Markle? Not the tabloids. Not YouTube speculation. The Vatican. What if Pope Leo XIV, yes, the Pope, made a comment so chilling, so cryptic, and so targeted that Vatican translators paused before releasing it publicly? And what if that comment wasn't just about the Duchess of Sussex's public life, but something darker, something buried, something even her most loyal supporters might not be ready to face? Because that's what just happened. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. In a closed-door discussion leaked from a Rome-based broadcast taping, Pope Leo XIV looked dead into the camera and uttered a warning. He didn't name names directly, but those who understood the subtext, those who know the code, understood exactly who he meant. And just 3 words stood out. She was warned. Who was warned? What was she warned about? And why is this spiritual leader, arguably the most influential religious figure in the world, suddenly wading into territory that has nothing to do with bishops or blessings, and everything to do with royalty, fame, manipulation, and buried sins? You're about to see a side of Meghan Markle you've never seen before, a side the cameras were never meant to capture. Because if the Vatican knows something about her rise to global stardom, if they've been tracking her, corresponding with her, warning her, and now speaking out, that's not just a headline. That's a crisis. And the question is, why now? Why would Pope Leo XIV break years of silence to reference a woman cloaked in light but shadowed by consequence? Why would senior Vatican officials scrub portions of a press release just minutes after publishing it? Why is Meghan suddenly backing out of engagements she'd already confirmed? Why are palace sources suddenly unavailable for comment? And why are we just hearing about this now? Let me be clear, this isn't just about religion. It's about power, spiritual power, political power, media power, and how all 3 may have collided in one very famous woman. Because Meghan Markle wasn't always the woman standing next to a prince. She was once a girl auditioning for bit parts, ghosting charity events, writing cheeky blog posts on the TIG. And somewhere between then and now, something changed. Was it just ambition? Was it luck? Or was there something else? You think you know her story, but what if the story you've been told was never the truth? Let's go back. Back before Meghan met Harry, before the paparazzi, before the royal wedding, before Megxit. Let's go back to a quiet dinner in Los Angeles in 2014. A high-profile donor event. Red wine, silk dresses, whispered Latin. In the corner sat a man with piercing eyes. A Jesuit priest turned Vatican investigator. He didn't speak much, but he watched. And at one point, according to one leaked eyewitness account, he leaned over to a colleague and whispered, "She doesn't even realize who she is yet." But they do. Who was he talking about? And more importantly, who were they? That same priest died mysteriously in Rome 2 years later. Natural causes, the official report said. But several pages of his final journal were ripped out. And one word was found scribbled in the margins of his Bible. Lioness. Now ask yourself, why would a Vatican insider use a term like that to describe Meghan Markle? And why would that same word reappear, almost verbatim, in a 2025 address by Pope Leo XIV, where he warned of a lioness among lambs, crowned before her time, whose shadow cannot be ignored? Coincidence? Or something more? Here's the part that gets even stranger. According to recently uncovered Vatican correspondence logs, 5 private letters were sent from the Apostolic Palace to an address in Montecito. 5. No public acknowledgement. No press release. No Instagram post. But the seals match. The logs confirm it. And one letter, according to a leaked source, contained just 6 words. You cannot escape what is coming. Now let's stop for a second. What would prompt the Vatican, the oldest intelligence network on Earth, to send cryptic warnings to a modern-day duchess? What do they know? More importantly, when did they know it? Some say Meghan's rise was meteoric. Others say it was orchestrated. Some claim she simply married well. Others whisper that she had help, spiritual, political, or even occult. But here's what can't be denied. Meghan's story, from deal or no deal to duchess, from red carpets to the steps of Windsor Castle, is unprecedented. Too clean, too calculated, too perfect. And now, the Pope, arguably the last person on Earth who should be involved, is stirring the pot. But this isn't just a story about a woman and a crown. It's about what happens when fame, secrets, and spiritual forces collide behind closed doors. Because something is shifting, quietly, but unmistakably. We've seen the signs. Whispers from royal courtiers, nervous aides, sudden retreats from public life, canceled press junkets, closed-door family meetings in Balmoral. And now, a cryptic papal message, directed, intentionally or not, toward the most divisive royal figure of the modern age. And here's the kicker. This isn't over. Because according to two Vatican insiders, a second phase is coming. One even called it the Great Unveiling. And if those whispers are true, if this is just the beginning, then we're about to see something that could shake Buckingham Palace, Hollywood, and Rome to their core. What was Meghan warned about? What did Pope Leo XIV mean? And what is the terrifying secret that she spent years trying to keep buried? Because one thing is clear. Her biggest secret is about to be exposed. And when it is, it won't just change how we see Meghan Markle. It'll change how we see everything. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What happens when one of the most secure institutions in the world just stops talking? No press releases, no public blessings, no cryptic tweets in Latin, just silence. Deafening, uncharacteristic, and calculated. Because that's exactly what happened the same week Meghan Markle touched down in Rome. There were no headlines about it. No buzz on social media. Not even a whisper from royal commentators. But if you look closely at the Vatican's press office, its daily schedules, its meeting logs, one thing jumps out like a red flag in a sea of white robes. The Vatican went completely dark for 72 hours. And not because of a religious holiday, or a papal retreat, or even a global emergency. No, the dates in question were a seemingly ordinary spring week. Late April 2025. But that's when Meghan Markle, unannounced, unpublicized, was spotted at Leonardo da Vinci International Airport, wearing black. No entourage, no press. And then she vanished. For 3 days. No public events. No Instagram sightings. No leaked security footage. Just gone. Now here's where it gets chilling. At almost the exact same time, within the same 12-hour window, two senior members of the Vatican's communications team canceled scheduled appearances on Vatican Radio. The official livestream from the Sistine Chapel cut off mid-broadcast. The daily bulletin, normally published without fail at 12 p.m. sharp, never went live. Instead, a single-line message was posted to the Vatican website. All press activities are suspended until further notice. That's it. No explanation. No timeline. No further comment. And then, radio silence. Now ask yourself, what on earth could have triggered that? Because the Vatican doesn't just shut its mouth without a reason. This is the oldest bureaucracy in the world. Centuries of protocol, hierarchies, systems within systems. Even during scandals, they speak. They clarify. They control the narrative. But this time, they disappeared into their own shadows. And those who work within those walls noticed. An anonymous Swiss guard, under the codename Raphael, described the atmosphere that week as hushed but tense. He wrote in a leaked signal message. It was as if something, or someone, was in the walls. We weren't told anything, just told to keep quiet. Stay visible, but say nothing. Visible, but silent. That's not protection. That's containment. And here's where things spiral even further. During that same 3-day window, several other unusual things occurred. A high-ranking cardinal, one of the Pope's closest advisors, was suddenly flown to a private medical facility in Geneva. No prior illness was disclosed. A scheduled speech by Pope Leo XIV at the Lateran Basilica was postponed. The reason? Unforeseen spiritual matters. Security footage from two internal Vatican wings, the Apostolic Library and the Archive of Forbidden Texts, was reported as corrupted. You heard that right. Corrupted. Let me be crystal clear, this is not normal. These are sacred spaces. Surveillance is airtight. Footage is backed up to redundant servers housed in deep Roman bunkers. And yet, gone. Damaged. Unusable. According to one internal report later leaked on the dark web, a technician was fired after noting. The deletion code used is not Vatican standard. It's external, possibly military grade. Now let's rewind a bit. Why was Meghan Markle in Rome in the first place? Here's where it gets muddy. Officially, she wasn't. There were no public statements from her team. No Instagram posts. No Vanity Fair exclusives. No subtle tip-offs to the Daily Mail. But multiple flight tracking logs confirm a private jet registered to a California shell company, frequently used by Archwell staff, landed at Ciampino Military Airport on April 23. 3 passengers to board. 2 were identified as staff. The third? Unconfirmed. But airport security logs list one guest as female, American, VIP, initials MM. So here's the working theory. Meghan arrived in Rome under the radar. She stayed at the Domus Sancti Marthi, the Vatican's private guest house normally reserved for visiting clergy and dignitaries. A secluded, high-security residence located inside Vatican City itself. How do we know? A Vatican chef, again, anonymously, claimed a specific plant-based meal request came through the kitchen that week. The type of request only senior visitors are allowed to make. Gluten-free. No dairy. Almond-based protein. No garlic. Now, does that prove anything? Not in court, but in context? It aligns with every other thread we've been handed. She was there. The Vatican shut down. Security went haywire. Surveillance was compromised. And something, or someone, triggered panic. Because on the third day, just before the silence lifted, one more thing happened. A private signal was sent from the Vatican's encrypted internal communication system to 4 select recipients. We don't know who received it. But we know the title of the message. Project Andromeda. Activate Tier 2. What is Project Andromeda? That's the million-dollar question. No one in the mainstream press has ever mentioned it. It's never appeared in any public Vatican document. But deep inside a data leak from a 2022 whistleblower, buried in a footnote, was a single reference. Andromeda Protocol refers to high-level threat involving spiritual deception, media infiltration, and predictive prophecies. Tier 2 implies external global figure involved. Let that sink in. Media infiltration, spiritual deception, predictive prophecies. And if Tier 2 was activated right after Meghan allegedly arrived, then the implication is chilling. Was Meghan considered a spiritual threat? Or worse, was she unknowingly involved in something far bigger? Now let's pause here for a second and ask, why would the Vatican care about a former actress turned duchess? She's not a cardinal. Not a political leader, not a religious figure. She's a public personality, a royal defector, a Hollywood brand. So why the classified protocol? Why the corrupted footage? Why the internal lockdown? Unless this isn't about who Meghan is, but what she represents. A symbol, a catalyst, a vessel. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds insane. Like conspiracy soup with a side of paranoia. But here's the problem. Too many coincidences. Too many silences. Too many suddenly missing people. Like Cardinal Montini, who was scheduled to meet with the Pope the day after Meghan allegedly left. He was reassigned to Brazil 48 hours later. No statement, no press. Or the Swiss guard Raphael, who sent that eerie message. His account went dark shortly after. Or the security technician who flagged the corrupted files. Gone. Vanished. Disavowed. And just when the silence seemed to lift, when the Vatican resumed its usual broadcasts and ceremonies, Pope Leo XIV said something in his very next appearance. It was casual, almost poetic, but if you were paying attention, it was damning. Sometimes a shadow visits our holy halls. It wears familiar beauty, but inside, there is thunder, and thunder always leaves a mark. Not a quote from Scripture, not a reference to any known saint, just thunder, a storm cloaked in beauty. What was he describing? Or more importantly, who? Because there's a theory. One that's gaining traction among rogue Vatican scholars, underground journalists, and yes, former royal aides. That Meghan Markle didn't just go to Rome for a vacation. She went because she had to. Something had surfaced. A file. A photo. A prophecy. Something that terrified the Vatican so much, it triggered a protocol they hadn't used in 25 years. And when they used it, when they activated Tier 2, they weren't just responding to a PR crisis. They were preparing for exposure. Because they know. They know something about Meghan that we don't. And what she left behind in that silent city may be the very reason the Pope spoke out. But what came next? That would make even the Vatican tremble. What kind of man looks straight into a camera and warns the world that she was warned without ever saying her name? What kind of man makes palace aides go silent, sends royal lawyers scrambling, and sparks panic across 3 continents? with one carefully crafted phrase. Who is Pope Leo XIV? Because to understand the gravity of that cryptic message, to grasp why his words sent shockwaves through the British press and triggered an unprecedented Vatican blackout, you have to understand the man who said them. And he is not your typical pope. Not even close. In fact, before he was Pope Leo XIV, he was something else entirely. Let's rewind. His birth name was Cardinal Matteo Bellini, a name well known in elite Catholic circles, but virtually unheard of outside of them. Born in 1968 in Bologna, Italy, Matteo was the son of a single mother and, reportedly, the illegitimate child of a well-connected diplomat. But it's what he did in his 20s that raises eyebrows. While other future popes were writing theology papers in dusty libraries, Matteo was bartending in L.A. You heard that right. Los Angeles. From 1992 to 1996, Matteo lived under the radar in California, using the alias Matthew Leone. Public records link him to a rental apartment in West Hollywood. There are even grainy photos, still circulating in underground forums, showing a lean, sharp-eyed man working the VIP door of a now-closed Sunset Strip nightclub. So how does a Hollywood doorman become the most powerful religious leader in the world? Well, according to insiders, he saw something. Something that changed him forever. Whispers say it happened one night in 1994. A private party. A celebrity compound. A spiritual event. One so disturbing, so profound, that Matthew walked out barefoot, eyes bloodshot, and left California within days. He entered a Jesuit monastery in northern Spain 2 weeks later, and never looked back. But the real twist? That party allegedly included a then-unknown actress from Los Angeles. Her name? Meghan Markle. Now, on the surface, this seems far-fetched. Meghan would have been just a teenager at the time, and Leo a man in his 20s, but age aside, they ran in adjacent circles. She was the daughter of a lighting director with access to Hollywood studios. He was a European exile working private events for the elite. According to one unnamed source, an XPA, who claims to have worked for a celebrity chef in Malibu, there was indeed an event in early '94 involving a strange European man with a deep stare and a young woman who wouldn't stop asking questions about power. Could this have been Leo and Meghan? Or is it just coincidence? Either way, what's undeniable is that after that night, Leo changed. His rise through the church was meteoric. By 2005, he was ordained a bishop. By 2015, a cardinal. And in 2022, after a surprise resignation by Pope Benedict XVII, Cardinal Bellini was elected in a stormy conclave that insiders still describe as one of the most bitterly divided in modern history. Why? Because Bellini, now Pope Leo XIV, was dangerous. Not in the way politicians are dangerous. Spiritually dangerous. Because unlike past popes who leaned into tradition, Leo spoke in riddles. He questioned dogma. He made enemies of both the ultra-conservatives and the secularists. And most of all, he hunted deception. He famously referred to his role not as shepherd, but as exorcist. There are spirits walking in Gucci shoes, he once said. Not every smile is innocent. Not every halo is divine. Chilling, right? Now imagine that man, with that worldview, turning his gaze toward Meghan Markle. It wasn't immediate. He never mentioned her publicly in his early years. But behind the scenes, there were signs. A 2023 Vatican report, later leaked, referenced the rise of feminine spiritual archetypes that distort the balance of creation. A 2024 homily warned of empires built on false victimhood. And then, in early 2025, Pope Leo XIV did something completely unexpected. He canceled his appearance at the World Interfaith Summit. No explanation. Just a single note sent to the event organizers. Something must be watched closely. I cannot look away. That was just weeks before Meghan's unannounced visit to Rome. And then, days later, came the message. Not televised, not scripted, but captured off-camera during a pre-interview mic check. Pope Leo, looking unusually solemn, said quietly to the priest beside him. She was warned. But the light she built blinds even her now. It has begun. Those 6 words, she was warned. It has begun, leaked within hours. And the world exploded. Not because of what was said, but because of who said it. This wasn't a YouTuber. This wasn't a royal biographer or a disgruntled former friend. This was the Pope. And not just any Pope, but one with a shadowy past, prophetic tendencies, and alleged connections to the very circles Meghan once orbited. So why now? Why speak now, after years of silence? Some say it's because Meghan crossed a line, that her upcoming Netflix docuseries includes footage tied to Vatican charities, that she references in Awakening that directly challenges certain Catholic doctrines, that her 2025 children's book contains embedded esoteric symbols. Too far-fetched? Then why did Vatican book reviewers demand a recall of the Italian translation of her 2025 release, The Lioness Manifesto? Why was a cardinal reprimanded for appearing at the same conference as her in Geneva? Why are Vatican interns being instructed not to mention the word Montecito in public documents? This isn't random. This is containment. Because Leo knows something, or believes he does. And he's not the only one. A senior exorcist from Palermo recently went on record saying, "She has drawn forces she cannot control. The warning was given. She didn't listen. Drawn what? From where? And why are more and more spiritual leaders, from Greek Orthodox bishops to Brazilian shamans, suddenly referencing a feminine shadow who walks behind the lion? Because this isn't just about Meghan's fame. It's about her symbolism. In Catholic theology, the lion often represents both divinity and deception. It's a dual image, a paradox. And Pope Leo XIV? He lives in paradox. A man who once walked Hollywood's red carpets now walks Vatican marble halls. A man who fled temptation now warns of it. And when he says she was warned, he's not just giving gossip. He's giving prophecy. So ask yourself, who did he mean? What did he see? And why, after years of silence, did this moment make him speak? Because Leo XIV doesn't act on impulse. He calculates. He observes. And when he finally speaks, it's because the storm is already coming. And in his eyes, it may already be here. But if Leo is right, and Meghan's rise was no ordinary climb, then the next revelation will be far more terrifying than we imagined. Because it won't just involve her past. It will involve her power. And the question the Vatican is still trying to answer? Who gave it to her, and why? What if everything we thought we knew about Meghan's charity work was a front? What if the smiling photo ops, the heartfelt speeches, the handwritten notes to girls in Rwanda, what if all of it, while inspiring on the surface, was only half the story? Because buried beneath Meghan Markle's glossy image of global humanitarianism lies something far more cryptic. Something tangled in bureaucracy, old money, and, most shockingly, direct ties to the Vatican itself. Yes, you heard that right. The Vatican. And not just through one charity. We're talking multiple NGOs. Fund transfers, conflicting mission statements, disappearing financial reports, and a handful of meetings that never made the headlines. But they happened. And those meetings? They weren't between Meghan and local aid workers. They were between Meghan and individuals operating at the highest levels of religious diplomacy. So here's the question. Was Meghan Markle being groomed by the church? Or was she playing her own long game? Let's start with the most innocent face of this mystery. World Vision. In 2016, Meghan took a highly publicized trip to Rwanda, where she was seen laughing with children, holding water jugs, and promoting clean water infrastructure. The media praised her compassion. Vogue ran a piece on her natural gift for connection. But guess who was quietly listed as a sponsor on that mission? Caritas Internationalis, a Vatican-funded global Catholic charity. You won't find their logo in the photos. You won't see their name on Meghan's handwritten notebook. But in the project's back-end report, archived on a third-party development server, the line is there. Partial support for regional logistics provided by CI Sector Coordinator via Holy See Regional Development Office. Translation? The Vatican helped fund the trip. And that raises serious questions. Why would the Holy See sponsor an actress's charity visit under the radar? Why was there no acknowledgement? No press release? And why, just 3 months later, was Meghan seen at a private charity gala in London, seated next to Monsignor Claudio Martinelli, a Vatican liaison for European humanitarian efforts? Publicly, it was a fundraiser for displaced girls. Privately, according to a leaked guest list, it was an invite-only evening labeled Strategic Future Dialogue, Feminine Leadership in Faith Sectors. One guest described Meghan as charming, inquisitive, and surprisingly well-versed in global church operations. Another said she asked about symbolic language and sacred rites. Odd questions for a TV star, right? But the rabbit hole goes deeper. Let's talk about the Terramar Project. This one's more obscure. Founded by Ghislaine Maxwell. Yes, that Ghislaine Maxwell. Terramar claimed to be a marine conservation group. What's lesser known is that in its final year of operation, 2016, it hosted a side panel at a UN-backed summit. One of the attendees? Meghan Markle. She wasn't listed on the official roster, but in behind-the-scenes photos leaked by a former UN staffer, you can clearly see her in the second row, taking notes. What's really strange? That same panel was co-sponsored by the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. Yes, the Vatican again. Why would a church-backed science body be involved with an ocean NGO? And why was Meghan attending without media coverage? A former UN intern told us under condition of anonymity. There were whispers even then that Meghan was being courted, not just by producers, but by people higher than that. She had attention from people who usually don't attend summits at all. So what exactly were they grooming her for? Visibility? Influence? Or was Meghan already playing a double role? Publicly, she was the Hollywood humanitarian, the face of compassion. Privately, she was appearing at meetings with religious strategists and papal science boards. One theory circulating in Vatican-adjacent circles is that Meghan was being positioned as a bridge figure, a secular ambassador capable of translating church values to modern audiences. Think about it. Young, mixed race, American, a global platform, outspoken on women's rights, yet willing to use tradition to elevate her image. To some inside the church, she was the perfect face for soft religious diplomacy in the 21st century. Now let's shift gears to a more recent development. 2023, Montecito. Meghan's charity Archwell received a spiritual advisory visit from a little-known foundation called La Luminosa, a European-based group that quietly funds interfaith projects in tandem with the Vatican's Council for Culture. Again, no public statement. But financial disclosures from La Luminosa's 2023 report list a private educational consultancy session with key public-facing family foundation in California. They don't say who. But there are only 4 nonprofits registered in Montecito matching the foundation's revenue and family-based governance model. Only one of them includes a duchess. You can connect the dots. La Luminosa's mission statement, by the way, to prepare the world for enlightened conversation between the divine and the digital. Sounds harmless, until you realize they also fund research into predictive theological psychology, a discipline that believes prophecy can be engineered through media. Now let's revisit that moment from Chapter 2. Pope Leo XIV saying, "She was warned. It has begun." If Meghan was part of a symbolic narrative, crafted by both Hollywood and the church, then what, exactly, began? And more importantly, what warning did she ignore? Let's not forget one final thread, possibly the most damning. The Malta Summit, 2014. Never publicly acknowledged by Meghan or the Vatican, but listed in diplomatic flight records, is a delegation of U.S. affiliated citizen volunteers brought to attend a closed panel on gender and media. A British source involved in the summit's press logistics confirmed that someone matching Meghan's description arrived late, was ushered into a side room, and met briefly with a group of Latin American cardinals. And here's the clincher. One of those cardinals was later implicated in covering up occult symbology found in church-adjacent charities. Coincidence? Or was Meghan inserted, whether knowingly or not, into a nexus of powerful religious operators attempting to rebrand spiritual influence through media avatars? If so, then every charitable visit, every photo op, every speech at the U.N. might have been double-coded. A performance on the surface, a message underneath. And that brings us back to the Vatican archives, specifically to a single file referenced internally as MM7/Lumina. That file, according to a recently leaked inventory, is classified under unverified prophetic engagement, under observation. And the subject? Meghan Markle. The implications are staggering. Did she seek out this power? Or was she merely chosen? And if she was warned, if someone, somewhere, told her to stop, then why hasn't she? What is she chasing? What force has she aligned herself with, or become? And why does Pope Leo XIV believe the world must now see the truth? Because Meghan's charities may have given out aid, but they may also have been delivering something else, something the Vatican recognized, and something they're trying, desperately, to contain. But what they discovered next wasn't just unexpected. It was terrifying. Have you ever heard a confession that wasn't your own, but still made your blood run cold? Because that's exactly what happened to one elderly Milanese priest in 2015, when a woman entered his quiet cathedral just after sundown, pulled her hood tight, refused to give her name, and begged for absolution for someone else's sins. At first, it sounded like any other late-night moment of spiritual desperation. But the longer she spoke, the stranger it got. And what she said next would haunt him until the day he died. The location was Basilica di San Simpliciano, one of the oldest churches in northern Italy. Ancient brick walls, iron-gated confessionals, a place where the air smells like incense, marble dust, and secrets. Father Giancarlo Benedetti had served there for over 40 years. He was known for his patience, his silence, the kind of priest who didn't flinch even when confessions got dark. He'd heard everything: affairs, murders, addictions, the deepest rot of the human soul. But nothing prepared him for that night. It was April 17th, 2015. Around 9:40 p.m., a woman entered the basilica alone. She wore all black. No jewelry, no handbag, just a plain shawl and running shoes. The only thing distinctive? Her voice. The priest would later describe it as calm, but shaking beneath the surface, like someone reciting a script they didn't want to believe. She didn't kneel. She didn't make the sign of the cross. She didn't say, "Forgive me, Father." She simply whispered, "I'm here to speak for someone else." He asked her name. She refused. He asked whose sins she wanted to confess. She said, "She doesn't even know what she's done. But I do. I helped her." The priest, taken aback, asked, "Is she in danger?" The woman paused, then whispered, "Not yet. But if they find out, if the Vatican finds out, then yes." That line, "if the Vatican finds out," immediately snapped Giancarlo into high alert. Why? Because this wasn't a typical confession. This wasn't guilt over a personal sin. This was protection. Whoever this woman was, she wasn't confessing to cleanse her own soul. She was warning someone else's. The woman went on to describe a ritual of alignment that had taken place in 2014. She didn't say where, but she said it involved 4 people. 2 of them, she claimed, were media influencers. One was a man of spiritual power, and the 4th was her. Father Giancarlo asked again, "Who is she?" The woman whispered, "She wears a crown she didn't earn, but it fits because it was promised to her." Now stop there. Think about that phrase. A crown she didn't earn, but was promised. Who does that sound like? The confession continued for over 30 minutes. The woman's voice cracked. She repeated the phrase, "I was complicit," 7 times. When asked if this involved crime or spiritual harm, she replied, "Both. But only one can be forgiven." The strangest part? At the very end, after sobbing softly, she looked up and said, "She'll deny it all, but one day, the Pope will speak. And when he does, it'll already be too late." And then she vanished. No name, no contact information, no way to trace her. Father Giancarlo documented the entire confession in a personal notebook that he kept separate from church records. Not because he wanted to violate confidentiality, but because something about this moment terrified him. That notebook, discovered after his death in 2019, contained one final handwritten line beneath the entry. Subject, MM. That's it. Just initials. But the Vatican archivist who cataloged his notes flagged that entry. Because MM had been used before in intelligence reports within the Church's Spiritual Oversight Committee. It stood for Monitored Magdalene, a coded designation for women suspected of playing a symbolic role in prophetic deception. Not criminals, not witches, but avatars. Carriers of influence. Archetypes capable of shaping public spiritual thought. And guess who else carried that label in past records? Eva Peron. Madonna. Yes, the Madonna. Princess Diana. And now, allegedly, Meghan Markle. What followed was even more disturbing. Just 6 months after that confession, October 2015, Father Giancarlo was suddenly transferred to a remote monastery near Lake Como. No explanation. No farewell. 3 months later, he was found dead. Official cause, heart failure. But no autopsy was performed, and when his body was found, his personal effects were missing. His notebook wasn't found until 2 years later, locked in a drawer beneath a statue of Saint Michael. And even then, some pages had been ripped out. The Vatican never commented publicly on the confession, but one internal memo, leaked in 2021, referred cryptically to confessional risk assessments regarding a woman in alignment with monarchic trajectory. The phrase monarchic trajectory sent Vatican watchers into a frenzy. There was only one woman who fit that timing, that rise, and those initials. Meghan Markle. Could the woman who visited Giancarlo have been her? Or someone close to her? A friend? An advisor? A publicist with a conscience? Or was it spiritual projection? Someone attempting to offload karmic guilt on Meghan's behalf? Whatever it was, it shook the priest, and it clearly raised enough alarm to make the Vatican take steps. Quiet ones, but unmistakable. His reassignment, the missing pages, the coded references, and now, in hindsight, Pope Leo XIV's cryptic 2025 message, "She was warned," reads like a chilling echo of that night in Milan. So again, who was warned? And what was she warned about? Because if someone close to Meghan tried to absolve her sins in advance, before she even married into the royal family, then what did they know? What sin was so great, it needed confessing before it happened? And why did the priest write, "Only one can be forgiven"? Forgiven by whom? The church? God? Or someone else? Because what's more chilling than sin itself is sin committed without awareness. And Meghan's rise, from actress to duchess to global force, didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in shadows, some lit by candlelight, some by camera flash, but the darkest ones? Those were lit in silence, just like the one in that confessional. And if Pope Leo's warning is real, then that silence is about to be shattered. Because the next revelation doesn't just involve a church or a duchess. It involves the one room no one was supposed to enter. And what Meghan may have found inside would change everything. Why was a surveillance wing inside the Vatican's archives mysteriously blacked out, the very same night Meghan Markle was allegedly in Rome? Why were security tapes wiped? Why was access to one particular room, known only as the Andromeda Wing, temporarily unlocked? And why, weeks later, was one priceless item missing, a rare manuscript with a title that seems too poetic to be coincidence? The Lion and the Labyrinth. Let's rewind. Vatican City is a fortress, a city-state smaller than a New York park, but housing some of the world's most priceless artifacts, relics, and records. Most people know about the Vatican Library. Fewer know about the secret archives, officially renamed the Apostolic Archive in 2019 to sound less ominous. But no matter the name, the truth remains. These halls contain the suppressed, texts banned by past popes, letters between monarchs and clergy, scientific discoveries deemed too dangerous for public release, prophecies, personal notes, even exorcism reports. And within those walls, deep below St. Peter's Basilica, is a section few even know exists. It's not on the map, not listed in any tourist guide. Vatican insiders refer to it simply as the Andromeda Wing. Named after the mythological princess chained to a rock as a sacrifice, the Andromeda Wing allegedly holds one of the church's most sensitive collections, documents and relics related to spiritual manipulation through media, symbols, and political power. Basically, it's where the Vatican keeps records of people they suspect are more than they seem. Not evil, not demonic, but symbolic vessels. Humans who have, knowingly or not, become channels for ideas that the church believes could distort the divine order. And on the night of April 25, 2025, that room, sealed by biometric access, blessed yearly, monitored 24/7, was accessed without authorization. That's confirmed by leaked server logs. But the surveillance footage? Gone. Hard drives erased. Backup servers mysteriously damaged. Only one thing survived: a corridor timestamp showing a black-cloaked figure entering at 2:47 a.m. and exiting at 3:06 a.m. 19 minutes. That's all it took. Now here's the twist. The figure's gait? Female. Height? Approximate 5 feet 6 inches. Hair? Concealed, but a strand slips from beneath the hood. Long dark, loose curl. And just hours before that footage was captured, flight logs confirmed that Meghan's jet had not yet left Italian airspace. Coincidence? Or something more? A Vatican security analyst later flagged the incident under a code rarely used, Visio Extra. Translation? Spiritual interference suspected during physical breach. Now pause for a second. How many people, even in global power circles, could trigger that response? It wasn't a hacker. It wasn't a diplomat. It wasn't a thief. So who was it? The most plausible theory? Meghan Markle, acting under guidance, her own or someone else's, entered the Andromeda wing that night. And she didn't leave empty-handed. That brings us to the missing item. Codex #3381X, the Lion and the Labyrinth. Filed under restricted texts, this ancient document was reportedly written by a Jesuit mystic in 1721. Only one copy existed. The text is rumored to be a poetic prophecy, a psychological map describing the journey of a woman cloaked in charm, framed in fame, but fated to forget her name. She is called the Lioness of Mirrors. She wanders through a metaphysical maze, chased not by wolves, but by her own reflection, one that grows darker each time she turns away from her origins. According to the text's last known translation, the final verse reads, "She will ascend in silk and ash, her voice an anthem to the unseen. But when she enters the sanctum's heart, she will know. The crown was never hers to wear. The mask was." Now take a breath. Because if Meghan did see that document, or worse, take it, that changes everything. It would mean she was either searching for confirmation of something she already feared, or retrieving evidence someone told her must never be seen. But how would she even know where to look? Simple. There's growing speculation that someone inside the Vatican, a whistleblower, may have tipped her off. An inside man. Possibly a cardinal disillusioned with Leo XIV's recent stance. Possibly a former aide of Pope Benedict XVII. Possibly even someone tied to Meghan's own early charitable contacts. All we know is this. After that night, three strange things occurred. The Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Vatican's long-defunct list of banned books, was briefly updated in the server's back-end system. Just one entry was added, L and L. A press secretary for the Vatican press office resigned abruptly. Her farewell statement cryptically included the phrase, "Some stories are older than our faith, and not all of them were meant to be read." Meghan returned to the United States, canceled 2 scheduled engagements, and posted a quote on her Archwell site from St. Catherine of Siena. "Be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire." St. Catherine, by the way, she's the patron saint of mystics. So what was in that room? Was Meghan trying to understand the whispers? The symbols? The strange coincidences that have followed her since childhood? Or was she there to cover her tracks? One source, deep within the Vatican's Theological Security Office, claims Meghan's name now appears in a new, unclassified folder called Mira 7, Mira being short for media influence and religious archetypes. There are said to be only 6 people on that list, all of them women, all of them either dead or spiritually sanctioned, except one. Because Meghan isn't just the former Duchess of Sussex anymore. To some within the church, she has become something else entirely. A living embodiment of prophecy. Not divine, not demonic, but disruptive. A mirror in motion. And what she saw in the Andromeda wing, whether it confirmed her fears or inflamed her ambition, is something she's told no one. Not Harry, not her mother, not the press. Because if she did read The Lion and the Labyrinth, then she knows how the story ends. And she knows the one phrase that terrified the mystic who wrote it. When the lioness finds her maze, she will lose her name to keep her crown. But Meghan's just getting started. Because next, the spotlight turns to prophecy, parties, and the one dinner in the Hollywood Hills that may have changed her destiny forever. And it wasn't a priest who warned her that time. It was someone far more dangerous. What do you get when you mix prophecy, champagne, and a guest list that includes billionaires, occult enthusiasts, and one woman who would soon be known as Meghan, Duchess of Sussex? You get a night that changed everything. You get a ritual dressed as a dinner party. And you get a prophecy that's still unfolding, right before our eyes. Because long before Pope Leo XIV spoke of a lioness cloaked in light, someone else saw it coming. Not a priest, not a royal advisor, but a power broker from Hollywood. And what he said that night in the Hollywood Hills still sends chills down the spine of those who were there. Let's set the stage. It was October 2016. Meghan had just started dating Prince Harry, though the relationship hadn't yet gone public. She was still filming Suits, still updating her now-defunct lifestyle blog The Tig, still living in a space between celebrity and obscurity. But that night, she entered a different world. An invitation-only event held in the Bel Air mansion of a reclusive billionaire producer known for funding esoteric art, films, and hosting alchemy-themed galas. We'll call him Mr. X, as multiple NDAs still surround his events. On the guest list, a globally known pop star with rumored ties to spiritualist circles, a British heiress with ancestral connections to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a former U.S. intelligence officer turned consultant for private security firms, a controversial Silicon Valley figure rumored to be backing media projects tied to AI-driven prophecy simulations, and Meghan Markle. You'd think it would have been a party, and it was. On the surface, crystal chandeliers, jazz quartets, a gourmet menu themed around the elements, guests dressed in gold and white. But after dinner, things shifted. The lights dimmed, candles were lit. Guests were led, barefoot, into a domed atrium lined with mirrors. And that's when it happened. A voice, measured, theatrical, began reading. It wasn't a script. It was a prophecy, written, allegedly, by a 17th-century mystic whose name no longer exists in any searchable archive. The text was titled, The Fourth Woman. It spoke of a woman who would rise, not from royalty, but into it. A woman who would claim the crown not by blood, but by symbol. One whose fame would grow through pain, through mirrors, through voices. A woman who will awaken one realm and disrupt another. The text ends with a chilling passage. When the flame-haired lion chooses her, and the cameras blink with angels' tongues, she shall enter the labyrinth smiling, but exit with the veil in flames. At that moment, witnesses say, all eyes turn to Meghan. Not jokingly, not playfully, but with a kind of eerie reverence. One guest claims Meghan whispered, "This is wild," and laughed it off. Another swears she went quiet, then asked, "Where did this text come from?" No one answered. Because no one really knew, or at least pretended not to. Here's where it gets disturbing. That prophecy, the fourth woman, has since been linked to a series of strange events. For women, all high-profile, all connected to powerful men, have been publicly referred to in certain elite circles as archetypes of this legend. The first, Wallis Simpson, whose marriage to Edward VIII triggered a royal abdication. The second, Diana, Princess of Wales, whose divorce and death reshaped the monarchy's image forever. The third, an unnamed Eastern European tech heiress who reportedly disappeared after publishing a paper on symbolic ascension and spiritual subversion. And the fourth, the woman seated in that mirrored room in Bel Air. So why was Meghan invited? That's the question that haunts the people who were there. One former attendee said, she wasn't the most famous person in the room. But the moment the reading started, it was like the energy shifted toward her. She continued, it wasn't that she believed in it. It was that she embodied it. She was becoming it, whether she meant to or not. Did Meghan know what she was walking into? Did she understand the symbolic weight of that night? Or was she just an actress, newly in love with a prince, drifting through elite circles, unaware she was being cast in a role larger than any she'd ever played? Because here's the twist. 2 weeks after that dinner, Meghan and Harry's relationship was leaked to the press. Suddenly, the world was watching. Suddenly, the prophecy's words, the flame-haired lion chooses her, seemed less like metaphor and more like map. Fast forward to 2025. A leaked Vatican transcript, allegedly from a spiritual strategy meeting led by Pope Leo XIV, includes this line. She walks with ancient mirrors behind her. Mirrors placed by hands she never saw. That is why she is both innocent and dangerous. Was the Pope referring to the same mirror ritual performed at that Bel Air event? And what of the power brokers behind it? Is Meghan their creation, their pawn, or their disruption? Because if she was cast in this role, if she was groomed as the fourth woman, the lioness of the labyrinth, then every move she's made since that dinner has taken on new meaning. Her public tears, her royal rebellion, her spiritual branding, her decision to speak out, to step away, to tell her truth. What if it was never about rebellion? What if it was about revelation? And here's where things get truly chilling. One of the guests that night, a spiritual advisor who later renounced the Hollywood scene and entered religious life, claims he had a vision during the reading. In it, he saw Meghan standing at the gates of a massive cathedral, wrapped in gold silk, holding a book of shadows. Behind her stood a crowd of people, and in front of her, the Pope. Only he wasn't smiling. He was weeping. So what was that night in Bel Air? A game? A joke? Or a moment of initiation? Because whatever happened in that mirrored room didn't stay there. It rippled. It followed Meghan into the palace, into the wedding, into the exit, into the fight for narrative control, and now into direct opposition with one of the most powerful spiritual forces on earth. Because Pope Leo XIV has spoken, he has hinted, and if the Vatican's silence is any clue, Meghan's journey isn't over. It's accelerating. And the next part of the prophecy? That's where it gets personal, because hidden in the Vatican archives are 5 letters. 5 exchanges between Meghan and the Pope. Sealed, untouched, but verified. What do they contain? A warning? A plea? Or a pact? Either way, they've been hidden until now. And what's inside them could expose everything. Why would a pope write to Meghan Markle? Not once, not twice, but 5 times. And why have those letters? Authentic, hand-sealed, logged by the Vatican, been sealed in a vault until the year 2045? What could possibly be so volatile, so spiritually sensitive, that even now, after global media pressure and royal whispers, they still refuse to release them? What's inside those pages? A blessing? A warning? Or the unthinkable, an accusation? Because these aren't fan letters. These are papal correspondences. Categorized under a Vatican classification so rare, even insiders describe it as spiritual quarantine. And one thing is certain. Meghan Markle didn't just catch the Pope's attention. She triggered something. Something that scared the Vatican so deeply, it had to be hidden. Let's start with what we know. Between December 2022 and June 2024, 5 letters were sent from Vatican City to an address in Montecito, California, registered to a shell entity connected to the Archwell Foundation. These letters were logged through Diplomatic Pouch D-Class, a protocol reserved for high-level, sensitive communications. No tracking, no customs, no digital footprint. But the seals? That's where things get interesting. Each letter bore a unique insignia, not the standard papal coat of arms, but a lesser-used crest, a lion holding a broken mirror with a Latin inscription, Revelata, non reversa. That which is revealed shall not return. What does that mean? One Vatican archivist, who asked not to be named, explained, that phrase is used only when the subject has entered a spiritual threshold. It means there's no going back. So what had Meghan done to reach such a threshold? Or more terrifying, what had she become? The content of the letters remains under lock and key. But fragments, yes, fragments, have leaked. In late 2024, a source close to a former apostolic nuncio claimed to have read the first paragraph of the second letter. It begins innocently enough. To the woman cloaked in the voices of many, whose image dances across the seas, I write not as shepherd to sheep, but as mirror to mask. Mirror to mask? Already, it feels less like a letter and more like a prophecy in verse. The paragraph goes on. Your ascent is neither condemned nor blessed, but it is seen. And in seeing you, we remember her who came before, the one who spoke of truth but bartered in mirrors. The letter reportedly ends with, before the crown, you made a deal. Before the veil, you turned the key. And so we write not to rebuke, but to remember. Let that sit for a moment. Before the crown, you made a deal. That line alone triggered speculation across theological forums and spiritual intelligence circles. A deal with whom? What kind of deal? And why does the Vatican sound more like a reluctant witness than a holy authority? What about the other 4 letters? We only have clues. According to Vatican Index logs, each letter was titled with a single Latin word. Speculum, the mirror. Clavis, the key. Lux falsi, false light. Ad missum, toward the mass. Animum, the soul. Each title seems almost poetic, yet chilling in context. One theology scholar pointed out that false light is a term used in exorcism rites to describe entities that mimic benevolence but distort truth. And clavis, the key, is mentioned in ancient texts as the unlocking of symbolic identity. An awakening of latent power. So is Meghan seen as unlocking something? or someone. Because here's what makes this even more surreal. The Pope's office has never acknowledged these letters publicly. But Meghan? In March 2025, she posted a short, unexplained quote on her Archwell Foundation page. It was quickly deleted. The quote, "He who writes from the mountains sees the sea with different eyes. I will not descend, I will expand." It was never attributed. But the cadence, the rhythm, matched Pope Leo XIV's past writings. Was it a veiled response? Was she pushing back? And here's where things take an even darker turn. In May 2025, a trusted papal advisor named Father Dario Ferrante vanished. Gone. No foul play. No note. His last known action? Digitally accessing the Animum letter, the final one in the series, just 3 hours before his Vatican keycard was deactivated. Coincidence? Or consequence? Because Father Dario was the same man who once told an Italian journalist, "There are those who carry spiritual royalty, and those who wear it like costume. We are at war between the two." Now let's put this into context. 5 sealed letters. 1 spiritual advisor missing. A Vatican phrase used only for irreversible transformation. And a woman, Meghan, who has never acknowledged these letters, never addressed the Pope directly, never denied, but also never confirmed. Why the silence? Is it shame, fear, or control? Because make no mistake, if the letters were flattering, she would have leaked them. If they were supportive, she would have quoted them. But the silence? That tells us everything. So now we ask, what did the Pope see? What did Meghan do? And what is so spiritually disruptive about her presence, her power, her rise, that 5 direct letters were sent, then buried until 2045? Is she being protected, punished, or prepared? And by whom? Because if you think this is just about theology or tabloids, you're wrong. This is about energy, about symbolism, about what happens when someone becomes more powerful in myth than they ever were in reality. And Meghan, whether she intended to or not, has become exactly that. A myth, a mirror, a lioness in a palace of smoke. And those letters? They're the smoke signal. But the Vatican isn't just dealing in paper. Because what they sent Harry next wasn't a letter. It was an object, ancient, coded, and unmistakable in its message. And when Harry saw it, he reportedly turned pale and whispered just one word. Why now? What kind of man looks straight into a camera and warns the world that she was warned without ever saying her name? What kind of man makes palace aides go silent, sends royal lawyers scrambling, and sparks panic across 3 continents with one carefully crafted phrase? Who is Pope Leo XIV? Because to understand the gravity of that cryptic message, to grasp why his words sent shockwaves through the British press and triggered an unprecedented Vatican blackout, you have to understand the man who said them. And he is not your typical pope, not even close. In fact, before he was Pope Leo XIV, he was something else entirely. Let's rewind. His birth name was Cardinal Matteo Bellini, a name well known in elite Catholic circles, but virtually unheard of outside of them. Born in 1968 in Bologna, Italy, Matteo was the son of a single mother and, reportedly, the illegitimate child of a well-connected diplomat. But it's what he did in his 20s that raises eyebrows. While other future popes were writing theology papers in dusty libraries, Matteo was bartending in L.A. You heard that right. Los Angeles. From 1992 to 1996, Matteo lived under the radar in California, using the alias Matthew Leone. Public records link him to a rental apartment in West Hollywood. There are even grainy photos, still circulating in underground forums, showing a lean, sharp-eyed man working the VIP door of a now-closed Sunset Strip nightclub. So how does a Hollywood doorman become the most powerful religious leader in the world? Well, according to insiders, he saw something. Something that changed him forever. Whispers say it happened one night in 1994. A private party. A celebrity compound. A spiritual event. One so disturbing, so profound, that Matthew walked out barefoot, eyes bloodshot, and left California within days. He entered a Jesuit monastery in northern Spain 2 weeks later, and never looked back. But the real twist? That party allegedly included a then-unknown actress from Los Angeles. Her name? Rachel Meghan Markle. Now, on the surface, this seems far-fetched. Meghan would have been just a teenager at the time, and Leo a man in his 20s, But age aside, they ran in adjacent circles. She was the daughter of a lighting director with access to Hollywood studios. He was a European exile working private events for the elite. According to one unnamed source, an XPA, who claims to have worked for a celebrity chef in Malibu, there was indeed an event in early '94 involving a strange European man with a deep stare and a young woman who wouldn't stop asking questions about power. Could this have been Leo and Meghan? Or is it just coincidence? Either way, what's undeniable is that after that night, Leo changed. His rise through the church was meteoric. By 2005, he was ordained a bishop. By 2015, a cardinal. And in 2022, after a surprise resignation by Pope Benedict XVII, Cardinal Bellini was elected in a stormy conclave that insiders still describe as one of the most bitterly divided in modern history. Why? Because Bellini, now Pope Leo XIV, was dangerous. Not in the way politicians are dangerous. Spiritually dangerous. Because unlike past popes who leaned into tradition, Leo spoke in riddles. He questioned dogma. He made enemies of both the ultra-conservatives and the secularists. And most of all, he hunted deception. He famously referred to his role not as shepherd, but as exorcist. There are spirits walking in Gucci shoes, he once said. Not every smile is innocent. Not every halo is divine. Chilling, right? Now imagine that man, with that worldview, turning his gaze toward Meghan Markle. It wasn't immediate. He never mentioned her publicly in his early years. But behind the scenes, there were signs. A 2023 Vatican report, later leaked, referenced the rise of feminine spiritual archetypes that distort the balance of creation. A 2024 homily warned of empires built on false victimhood. And then, in early 2025, Pope Leo XIV did something completely unexpected. He canceled his appearance at the World Interfaith Summit. No explanation. Just a single note sent to the event organizers. Something must be watched closely. I cannot look away. That was just weeks before Meghan's unannounced visit to Rome. And then, days later, came the message. Not televised, not scripted, but captured off-camera during a pre-interview mic check. Pope Leo, looking unusually solemn, said quietly to the priest beside him. She was warned. But the light she built blinds even her now. It has begun. Those 6 words, she was warned. It has begun, leaked within hours. And the world exploded. Not because of what was said, but because of who said it. This wasn't